So hi, welcome to this episode. So in this one, we are going to handle the delete aspect of our articles from the administrative interface. So far, we are able to add articles and update articles, preview them as well. So with the remaining function here we have is the delete. So how do you go about deleting the articles? And when we look at it, we have different aspects of deleting articles. So the first one is to be able to pick up a certain number of articles, then choose the action delete, and that action should be applied to the selected articles. The other option we have is to be able to click on the delete button here, which is in front of a specific article, and then get that article deleted. And the third aspect is to preview the article, and once previewing the article, you should be able to click on delete and get the article deleted. So there are different ways of handling these aspects of deleting content from the database. So it is all about strategies, I would say. So the strategy I would like us to adopt right now is that we'll have a file called delete or admin dashboard delete or admin delete, something like that. Then to that page, we are going to pass in the ID of the article we pick from here. Right, so that's the first thing we would like to do. The second one is to have, since if you look at it very, you could see that I covered the whole thing, the whole content here with a form tag. So it means at some point we have form elements inside this table or the list of the articles. These form elements, which are the input box, the check boxes. So if we submit this form, it means we could have access to that data. So there we'll use that aspect. So once we change the action into delete, it should automatically submit that form to the delete page, and the delete page should be able now to pick the various IDs of the articles selected and then handle the deletion. So here we use single, we pass the ID, then once the ID is submitted, the delete file should delete the given article. Then when we pick up articles and we choose an action we apply, then the form should be submitted and sent to the delete page, and the delete page will be able to pick up these particular articles and delete them. And if we are previewing the article, so here too we'll pass just the ID to the delete file, and then it will be able to pick only that given article and delete it. So let's see in practical how that is, how we can implement such thing. So first thing is that I'm going to pass the ID. We'll start from the simple aspect. So we go to admin dashboard content, then we unfold the content here where we have the delete. We now add the link admin content delete.php. So this is the page we'll create that will be in charge of handling the deletion. So we'll go to our folder, we create a new file, we press Ctrl S or save, then we pass in the name, we save it, we open our PHP. This page is going to contain mostly PHP code for now, so we don't need to close it. So once that's done, I can now, at this point, while we are listing the various articles throughout through the for each loop, so we can just pass in the ID just like we did for the preview, which is here. So once we have that, we can now pass the ID. So if I now reload and pass my mouse over on the delete button, so for each article we should see that it goes through the admin content delete page with the given ID. So we can now go to the delete page and see what we can do with that. So the first thing is to make sure that we guard the page and only the admins can have access to that. So we do the same thing we had here, which is the guard. So we bring the session, we bring the guard. Without a session, the guard won't work, so we need that. Then once we have that, the next thing you could think about is to get the ID. We have already implemented that in somewhere here. So we get the ID. I think let's take the single. I think this single here. Okay, yes, this is the same thing. So I think I will use rather admin content single. Okay, and we have the ID. We need the database connection, so we go ahead, we get that, all this here. So we need all this. So at this point we get the article ID, the article that is forwarded, or that is with the article we are trying to reach out or to get. So we have the ID of the article at this point. So here, this arrow, should it take us to the index? So let's go to admin dashboard, the PHP. Okay, so we get the ID. Once the ID is there, we now get the database connection. So in a simple form, or at this point, all you need to do is just prepare a query where you delete the article where the ID is this. So basically, let's prepare a query. So instead of select here, we are going to have a delete query. So if not is no database connection, so here we are going to do delete from delete, that's the table. So articles where, delete articles where, then the article ID is equals to the question mark, and here we pass in the article ID. So once that's done, we don't need to fetch the article, we just execute this statement. So it means we could check here. So if the execution of the statement goes successfully, so article deleted successfully, so we can now display the success equals to article deleted successfully. Great. So basically that's all. And if it does not run well, then we can now create the error variable. Let's bring that error variable somewhere. So we do like we did previously, which is to have a variable to contain various errors. So let me declare that variable somewhere here. So variable errors should be an empty array. Great. So once, if there's any error, we can now insert it in the variables, the errors variable, and we leave it without setting the index, and we'll say could not delete from database. So something like that. I don't know why I use full stop here. So could not delete from database. And we could also use a try catch exception here, a try catch statement. So but let's keep it simple and see how it goes. So basically this is what it will do here. So if everything goes well, we'll get this error and so on. And since this page basically does not contain any front-end elements, so here these errors we are not being able, will not be able to process them directly. So I think it's rather easier if we just echo them like this, and echo, and maybe we could stop the script once that is done by using exit, or you could use die. So since you call that statement and dash, or and nothing else, but in a more professional way, you could rather handle the errors on this page. So if anything, you bring the user on this page and you log the error in a session, and you can be able to catch that error on any other pages. So, and you can now have to reset the sessions. So for here we'll keep it simple, so we just echo like yes, article deleted successfully, otherwise we'll give an error. So before I do that, let me add a dummy article to delete, and I pass in some simple text. Pick a dummy image like this, then fill in some dummy text as well. Author is Alice. Save. So new article saved successfully. So if you go back to the content, okay, here you could see that I could not access that article because we limited the number of articles we have at the admin, because we want to handle the pagination. So for me to see my article, there are a few ways we could handle that. The order in which, so here we can see that we see the first articles, not the last article. So we could do the sorting. That's admin dashboard. So no, don't admin dashboard, admin dashboard content. So where we select the articles, meanwhile here we actually ordered by created at descending. So I'm expecting to have my latest articles created showing here. So let me see what I have. If I do 0 to 4, so nothing changes. So order by, let me try ascending. It does not change much. So let me remove the order by and remove the limit and see. I get all the articles. This is surprising. Okay, let's say I order by ID and I do descending. Okay, great. So I guess the issue might be the format of the data used here. So probably the database is not being able to compare these various dates. And also, since the articles are, okay, I think that's the actual truth. So all the articles here have been added on the same day. So basically the date is the same. There's no way of sorting them by the date. So this would make sense here. So for that purpose, let's just use the ID, which is always different. So that's great. So we'll get the latest articles which are here, and I can see my article here. So if you try deleting it, let's see what we have. So could not delete from database. So I think this is where we need to try and catch if there's any PDO exception. Try catch PDO exception. So try to do this. Delete it. And so we try to delete this article. If not, so if the article was not deleted, we can just say this. No, not that. So we take all this here. So if no, not here. So rather here. So if deleted, so if the article was successfully deleted, we can do this. Otherwise we could say this. So now we can handle the PDO exception case. So which is check the, if there's any issue with the exception, we just say error colon, and then we append the error message. Great. So let's give it a try again and see. So if I try deleting, again could not delete from database. So I suspect my issue is from my query. Delete from article. So delete article deleted successfully. So yes, that's great. So if we refresh our database, the article vanishes. So basically that's the basic function we need. So I've deleted another article. Congratulations to me. Okay, and this is a dangerous function. So for this kind of issues, to avoid this kind of issues, you would usually want to add, so we go to the admin content page, because I actually deleted an article I didn't want to. So what we can do here is that we'll add some JavaScript, a little bit of JavaScript. So what we want to do is on click. So whenever they click, the user or the admins click on this link, we would like this little JavaScript to just equals to, yes, in quote, return confirm. So we use the JavaScript function confirm, which actually pops up a question, right? Are you sure? So let me use double quote inside. Are you sure? So it actually asks you this question and gives you the option of choosing yes or no. So that's what the function confirm does. So if you say yes, it will return true. If you say no, it will return false. So at that moment, when we say return whatever the user chooses, so we are actually returning either true or false. If it returns true, then the action we are trying to take will proceed. And if it returns false, that's in case the user says no, then the action we are trying to carry out will be cancelled. So that being said, if I reload now and click on delete, so it asks me, are you sure? If I say no or cancel, nothing happens. But as soon as I say yes, then the deletion will happen. So this is a little guide, a little guide that could help in protecting you from taking inadvertent actions and deleting your content. So that being done, let's go ahead and look at how we can improve our delete file. We have the other option where we'll have to delete many articles at the same time, and also these actions, and also the delete here might seem unsafe, because imagine somebody just realizing that, okay, by querying your website domain name and then appending admin content edit.php !id and then the ID of an article, by simply calling that file. So let me copy the link. So copy link. So by realizing that, okay, if I pick this link and then call this link several times, this will be your website. So let's say your site.com. So https yoursite.com/admin content delete.php id. So if they realize this, they could simply write a JavaScript code which says, okay, from 0 to 1 million, so something like, let's say the JavaScript could look like something, or even some PHP code, and then go through a for loop. So for variable I equals to 1, so from the first article, always increment the ID of the article, and then so for the first article equals to this, and let's say I less than or equals to 1 million. So they could give like some huge number like this, right? So that's 100,000. So let's say something like that. Then increment the ID. So we go from ID 1 to ID 10,000, no, 100,000, yes. So to ID 100,000, and for each one of these articles, yes, let's say call, I'm just using this dummy function, call this URL. Basically they will use something that helps them to make a call to your URL. So it's like visiting the URL in the address bar. So this can be done using what we call HTTP clients. So in PHP we have like Gozo, you have curl. So you could use any of these elements and query this URL. So here they are going to pass the I. So basically, in the blink of an eye, this script will run a bit, then instantly you see that all your articles have been deleted in your system. So this can be a danger. So in our case, there's a limitation, which is the admin guard. The admin guard actually uses the session. So basically, you have to be on the same server, on the same machine, to be able to call this page. So another thing people usually use to is what we call the cross-site request forgery, so CSRF. So on most modern frameworks, you have options that have how to have tools to handle the cross-site request forgery, which means as far as you are trying to call files on my website, like we did with this core, our dummy core, if as far as you are trying to make it from a different server or different machine, my machine should reject it. So that protects your system from this kind of things. And there are many other tricks people use to prevent people from querying such things, right? So some other cases, people will rather use a form instead of a normal get request like this. So they will rather use a form. So this will be a submit button every time you click on delete. So you are actually submitting a form, and the form will also be guarded with cross-site request forgeries and so many other things to protect it. So yeah, this is a little bit parenthesis around this issue. So here, assume this is just for demonstration purposes, for you to see how the ideology and the mental model around the development of such tools or such systems. All right, so once we have that, what we want to do now is to handle the submission through the mass action. So here, let me make this guy look like this. I will know that this is a neutral action. We don't need to take it. This is the actual action we want to take. So great, so something like that. Cool. Okay, so I think I'd rather use the underscore. Let me see. Okay, not bad, but that's common. So let me use the hyphens, and should we add any value? So by default the value will be delete, so no problem. So here too we might need a snippet of JavaScript. So that JavaScript will be to see that whenever the form changes, so we can say okay, so this is a bit strange here. What I can do, I don't want to write any JavaScript here, but rather we can write the JavaScript up here. So what we will need to do is that we need to listen to what we call the change event on this element. So basically we will be like on change, just like we did now with the on click event, but this time around, since it is a select box, when things happen that something, they change the option of this select box, what will happen? So we could call a JavaScript function which is let's say submit. That function will be submit form, or we'll call it submit mass delete form, so something like that, and that will be a function actually. So let me put it in quote like this. So we should call this function like this as a function. So it means we will need to create that function. So let me reload and try it, and you see if I click action it won't do anything because there's no change. But if I click on delete, then I might be having an error by now. So let me check my console, and you can see reference error. So with reference we try to call a function which does not exist. So I can go somewhere in my document header right here and then insert a script tag, because I want to use JavaScript, yes. And then here I can create that function. It is simply like we create functions using PHP. and then this function, all it will do is, let's say it will just alert delete them all. So that's what this function will alert once we try to delete. So if we reload, then I try to choose delete them all. So it means this function is actually being called. So what the function will do is simple. It will simply be in charge of submitting our form, which is the form here. We do not need to specify any action. That is, if we want to handle the form on the same page, but rather, so in our case, we want to indicate the admin content delete.php page. So admin content delete.php. So in this case, we can see we are not actually indicating an ID. So we want this file to do these two jobs. So we are not indicating any ID. It means by submitting this form just like that, this condition will fail, right? This condition will fail, and then it will now give us an error. So let's go ahead. No, we cannot submit because we haven't done the submission. So we want that once the user changes the action, this function should be called, and the function should try to capture this form. So we'll give the form a unique ID, and that will be mass form. Let me call it like that. So in our JavaScript now, the little JavaScript we have, we are going to say, okay, let the mass form element, so element is equals to document dot query selector. So we query this a query selector, we specify it is an ID of mass form. So once we have that, we could say, okay, we have the form element. So form element now get submitted. So we say dot submit. So there is a function attached to that element. Since it is a form, by default JavaScript has this submit function attached to the element, which now plays the role of the button in case we have a form. So you have these buttons. So if we did not want to use JavaScript for these purposes, we would have actually added a manual button here. So once you change the action, it won't submit it automatically, but you have to click on that button. But in our case, we are lazy, we want to handle that. So like you just saw right now, when I tried to do delete, you see the form was submitted and the action was called, the form action was called, which is the admin content delete page. So once that page is called, this condition here which says that an ID is required in order to be able to pass through, otherwise we'll be stopped here, and that's what we got. Since we did not call that page with an ID, it tells us yes, we cannot go further, we need to specify an ID, and it asks us to return to the whole admin dashboard. So we can go back to the content. So it means we'll have to make some modifications on our admin content delete page. So the first modification is to pass through this condition. So we could add some conditions here by saying, okay, if not is set, see if this does not exist, and so if it does not exist, and then also there's no post. So if we did not try to submit the form through a post variable, not a set post, or the size of, or we can, I think, what did we use when we were creating the main dashboard? So we use count rather. So we counted it, and it must be greater than 0. Okay, so it's equals to 0. So that's okay. if the ID was not passed. Okay, now let's see if the form was submitted. So if the form was submitted, it must have the variable post, right? The post must have been created, and the post element must be greater than 0. If they are not, they are either 0 or less than 0. So less than or equals to 0 if for any reason, but in general it should be equals to 0. So if that is the case, if these conditions are not satisfied, then we can display the error. So this and this is we try to access through an ID, we try to come in with an ID, and this is we are trying to come in with a form submitted. So if we assume I removed this, so I will say if not is set. So I think rather instead of this it should be not is set, variable post, or the count of variable post is less than or equals to 0, then we can get that error. So let's give it a try again and see what we have. Delete. So we are having some syntax error. Line 6. So this must be due to the brackets here. So we have this if bracket, then we have a set bracket which closes here, and then we have this bracket which is the second group of conditions which covers everything, which is supposed to be here, and then after that we have to add the if statement bracket. Yeah, it makes sense. Submit again, yes. Then undefined index ID, yes. So we are able to actually cross that line, and now it is telling us the ID is undefined. Yeah, of course it makes sense. So this means it won't even be able to delete that article, and you can see here, so nothing happens. Here we have undefined article ID. This is important because if we came in with the submission of the form, it means we did not come with any specific ID. But in that case, we can get the IDs. We can get the IDs from the input. So to show you what I'm saying, we have to var dump the post. So let's do var dump, and then I will do die here so that we see. So if I pick up, let's say these two articles, so that's article number 3 and then article number 1. So if I now do delete, so we can see that there's some content in the form, which is one, we have the mass action, the form name, and the button is delete, and we have check 3 and then check 1 with their value. So check 3 has this value and check 1 has this value. So it means basically the forms is submitted and some articles are submitted. This can be the IDs, right? This could be the IDs. Now how do we access them? Because we don't know if we are actually dealing with check 1 or check 2 or check 3 or check 4. So how do we access them? So the access of the indexes of the element are not important here. So we just need the array of the IDs. So that's these guys, this guy. So how do we get them? So one thing I could think of is to get the array values. So let's say here I would like to get only array values. So that will be, let's say, value, let me make it a underscore values, and it will be the array get values, array get only values. So I think we can check array columns, array combine, array div, array filter, array interact. So here we have keys. So array merge, array multi-sort, array pad, pop, push, run, reduce, replace, reverse, search, shift, slice, splice, sum, udiff unique and shift values. Yes, array values. So we can use the array values and then bring in the post element. So that's the post element. So normally if we do that, we should be able to get only the values here. So if I var dump these values, let's see what we have. Great. So by doing that, let me also stop the script here. So let me refresh. Yes, so we get these values. So except the delete value, which we don't want. So if that value even comes in the first place, it means we might have so delete, where is that coming from? That should be, let's say, the form, and we have delete here. There should be some kind of button somewhere also. Let me search for button. No button. Okay, no button. So let's find out where that delete comes from. It should be this guy. Let me cancel this. Of course, this is the select. Yes, it was coming. Let me do that. Of course, I can't do this. Okay, this actually comes from here, and I could set value here. The value should be, let's say, it is deleted. The only thing I need is just the action to change. So let me give it a value of del, something like this. Okay, so once we do that, we can go ahead and pick up some articles, do delete, and now we get the del as value. So we now have an array of values, except one value we don't want, which is the del. So we can just pop that out. Okay, already we know that that element is the first element. It's always the first element, because I think PHP orders them based on their arrival on the form. So we could simply say, so we could simply remove the last element by saying, okay, the array again, the array of values again is the array of value with the element with index, the first index, cancelled, right? Yes, no. So we don't even need to do that. By just doing this, we now cancel the element of the first ID, and if we now bring out the form, I mean the value, the array, so it's an article ID 16. Okay, this is because we didn't stop it. So let me stop the script here. Okay, so we are saying no. So I think the best way is unset. So unset. So we unset that element of index 0. Great. So by doing that, we now have the IDs left. So it means we actually have an array, which is the array, the array values. So that's the list of IDs of the articles the admin would have picked up. So these are IDs. So we could say article IDs rather. IDs. So AIDs. So at this point, if we have article ID, that is one article. So when we have many articles selected, we are not going to have just this ID, but rather AIDs. So we could also check, okay, if this does not exist, the get ID does not exist. So if is set, so if it is set that we have the get, if you have $sign get with the ID, if that is set, then we get it. Otherwise, then the article ID variable is going to actually have the article IDs. So this will change this variable into either an integer or an array if we are having an array of elements. So far this is going well. So if we try now, we should have a different error because array to string conversion on line 25. So 25, this is somewhere here, 25 here, because we are trying to access one element, right? So in the case we have IDs, this is going to have many IDs. So how do we check that? If it is many, we do, if it is one, we do this. Otherwise, if there are many, then we delete where ID in, so in like array. So I don't know the MySQL statement for that. I guess I have to quickly check it. So that's going to be if. So how do we do that? So if here we could say if not is array. So if it is not an array, that's the article ID, we can do this. So we can do this. If it is not an array, definitely this is a single article. Else, then the statement will change. So we still use the statement variable where in. So this is going to be an array. So where the ID in, I think we should use ID in. I guess so. Where ID in whatever array, and this is going to be an array. Yes. So let's give it a try and see. So the statement will execute by passing here either an ID or here either an array. Great. Let's go ahead and see that. Array to string conversion 29. So 29 is here. So I think we could also do this here. This is becoming really not okay. So let's say we take this here. We delete one element, then if it is an array, we pass in the array. We don't convert it. So we can get rid of our try and catch. And then after that, we just check if the deleted was okay, either from the single deletion or multiple deletions. And then we can reload. And then it says PDO statement execute. So invalid parameter number of bound variable does not match number of tokens. So yes, because I passed in an array which is going to have many elements. Since this execute it requires an array, so it assumes I am passing it an array of elements, and these elements are just separated. They are just indexed like any normal array. So PDO expect that the number of elements in that array should equal the number of variables we have here. So here I have one variable, and in my article ID, which is now in the case of an array, it is going to have more than one element. So there will be inequality in the number of arguments, and that's what PDO is telling me here. Invalid parameter number. So I think my challenge is in using the multiple deletion with PDO. So right now what I'm thinking of doing is just to loop through the array. So for each something like this, then I can prepare the statement and delete, prepare and delete. So but I'll try to think if there's any way of deleting many elements. That's just an SQL skill, to deleting many elements at the same time. So the issue here is that the in function requires a kind of list of elements like this. So let's say the first ID, the second ID, the third ID or so with comma. So in our case we are having an array, so it means we have to find out how we now format this article's ID once we are dealing with the array. So that problem could have been solved right here. Instead of having the array values of it, we could simply array values. So here we insert. So once we have the IDs, we could now flatten that into a list. So one best way of doing that is by using a for loop, or we do array maps and so on. So basically we have to go through the array and then pick each one of the elements then and put it in the list. So basically that's what this would do. I don't like the idea because I think it can consume a lot of resources if the array is big. So basically what I'm trying to say is that we'll say for each, so we'll remove the comment, for each array IDs is like this as an ID. So these are IDs. So we need, let's say, list, ID list. So we're also going to have some challenges when it comes to submitting deleting one article, because this wouldn't exist. So we'll have to come back and then handle these errors as well. So for now, let me go ahead and say list. It's a string, so it's going to be a string, and that string will have a bracket. So it should have some kind of brackets like this, and then the content inside. So basically this is incredible. So we'll add the brackets after we are done with the list. So let's say it is a string. So for each of the elements we are going to append so let's say list equals to list. So basically we want to say list equals to, then we append whatever we want to append. So to do that we use the shorthand, so concatenation shorthand. And what do we want to append? The ID. So not only we want to append the ID, we also want to append a comma after the ID. So this will only happen unless we have the last I elements, unless, so I can use the index as index pointing to the ID, sorry, index. So index index. So if we are not dealing with the last element, so that's if ID. So if index is not equals to, it's not the same as the array of IDs, right, last element. So if it is not the last element, so if it is, how do we get the last element? We just use the array, we get the size of the array, and we reduce one element. That gives us the element with the highest ID. So if the index, the current index is not the highest element, we add the comma at the end. Otherwise we just append the ID without adding the comma. So at the last element we don't add a comma. So once we are done with that, we can take the list again, right? So after going through building up the list like that, we can now take the list again and then add some bracket, append some brackets. This is completely raw, so the list, then we concatenate with another bracket. So this should have us our list in the format MySQL expected here. So in this case, when we have the article IDs done like that, instead of IDs, we are now going to use the list. Great. So if it is one item, we have the items ID, otherwise we'll have this list built up here. So this should actually help us if we satisfied MySQL. This seems to be working. Syntax error in unexpected, line 16. So we go back to line 16. That should be somewhere here. So it's saying that syntax unexpected, I think it should be dot equals to. So we reload. It should be dot equals to, that's the concatenation. Okay, it is now giving me the error on line 18, which is here. So yes, it is dot equals to, not equals to dot. So yes, this should be fine. Now we reload. Could not delete from database. So why couldn't it delete from the database? That's now a MySQL issue. So I can now try to put it in a try catch and get PDO exception, and then we can echo the error get message. So let's try again. Reload. Could not delete from database. That's the error from this side. So no. Okay, so let me go back and see what we have. The articles are still there. So delete in. So what I'm going to do is to try to actually see that list. What do we have in the list? Okay, so once we have the list, what are we passing? When I said execute, okay, so that should be the list. So let me try to kind of display that list in here. So var dump the list and see what we have. So let me pick up some articles, choose the action. So it means in the first place this did not execute, so this was not executed, so it's probably here. So we go ahead, reload. Yes, this is the way we are having the issue, and you can say our list, is kind of not well built. So okay, it means this condition is not running properly. It's of course because we were saying if not in array, if not is array. So now the list is not an array, so it's rather a string. So we need to check, and if it is the ID, it is going to be a string as well. So how do we distinguish whether we are actually dealing with one element or we are dealing with a list of elements? So this is a very good exercise to try out our logic levels. So we can go ahead and say so once we have that, so one way we could solve this problem is the building of the list. We leave it out, so we stick to this here. So we keep this to IDs here, stick to ID. So up to this point we'll be dealing with an array. So I'll get rid of all this here. I'll take this off from here. So if we are dealing with many, then we'll deal with an array. At this point it's an array, at this point it's an array. So as far as it is an array, we don't do the single deletion. So if it is an array, then we will do multiple deletion, and that's where we can now go ahead and process the list by now transforming the array into a simple string of list of elements. So yes, we have the list now. So instead of us to pass here the ID, the article ID, we are now passing the list rather as value. So without removing the array, so we pass the list as value. So that being said, we should be able to now get it executed. So I'm just keeping this try and catch. So we try again. Could not delete from database, so no exception as well. So where is the problem coming from? So if we check our list, so we check our list, we have ID, and we are saying if index, this index is going to be, let's say, if the first element, so we are going to have 0, the second element 1, 2, and so on. So if index not equals to array of IDs, yes, which already exists up there, so it could also be article ID, which doesn't sound right. So array of ID size, let me use count and see, -1. So we do that. So I will try to just echo the list here. So at this point, let me just dump it and stop the request. Okay, so it brings us the list. So here I'm also assuming I would like to try something. When things happen like that, I would like to go straight forward, manually do it. So I think my issue here is that I'm not formatting this list well, and it seems my condition of formatting the list doesn't seem to work properly. The semicolon at the end seems to be the issue. So let me try to find out how to remove that. So we are saying that if it is the last element, count this last element. If index not equals to the last element, we add semicolon, and in case it is, we don't. So let me still be sure of this very well. Let me reload. I get the same thing. So let me find out what I have when I do this. I do this. So let me dump this guy. So array of IDs count, then the last element. Let's see what we have. Since we are having 2, so I expect it to have, it gives me 3. This is bad. So size of so indeed, so size of IDs, let me dump this guy and see. So we dump this guy here first, then we dump I'm trying to do something, size of, and remove that and get rid of that. So I want to know the size and the array itself. So go ahead. So we have array, it shows int is 2. It is 2. and the size is, so the array is an array of this guy 2 element, and then the size is 2. So if the size is 2 and I do size minus 1, what do I have? I should get 1. Yes. So this basically means size of this not equals to size of this minus 1. So basically that's what I needed to do, size of this minus 1. Yes, that's all. I was just trying to compare the indexes inside. That's really wrong. So what I was trying to do is the array of IDs. We want to pick the element which is at the last position. So once we pick that element, I want to see if that element is equals to the index we are on, which is absolutely wrong. We'll never get that. So what we are looking for is if the count of the element, the index we are on is the last index. So to get the last index is to get the size of the array and remove 1. So if it is the last index, we cannot append the comma, and otherwise we can now append the comma. So once that's done, we can now display our list and see what we have, if it is well formatted. All right, so and then we are having this issue. So we are saying if index not equals to this, we add this and comma, otherwise we add this. And this is incredible. So if index, so let me var dump the index every time. So echo index, echo a br, then we also echo okay, so you want the index and you want ID. You want the index and the ID, so I will just concatenate some string of br to see the difference. So let me go through the array. So for each one of the arrays, we got the index. Let me say index with hyphen, so index hyphen ID. Index hyphen ID, index hyphen ID. So what we are saying here is that we have the index as element of index 1 is 3. Yes, element of index 2. We shouldn't be able to get element of index 2 because the index shouldn't be 2 if you have only 2 elements in the array. So the array should have the index of 0, 1. So I think this should be index minus 1. This should always be index minus 1 because we are starting from index 0. So if we check, great, so that's it. So this index here actually is the index of looping, not the actual index of the array. So the index of 10s we do through the for each. So the first 10, second 10, and so on. So the first 10 we remove 1 because we know the array is starting from 0. So the index on the first 10 is going to be 1. By removing the 1, we end up with 0 here, which is the first element of the array. Which is the first element of the array. So if this first element of the array is not the last element, then we can go ahead and append the comma. Otherwise, we don't append any comma. Then we get our list as this. So this should give us a smooth list like this. So at this moment, I expect my SQL to now make it easy on us and execute this request. So I said, if that is the case, we do this. So we execute this. So let me keep it like that and see. So we go ahead. Could not delete from database, so let me also remove this try and catch, because after all it doesn't seem to be saving me right now. So if we have our list built, and then to the list we add this comma. So one thing I'm now thinking of is it might be that we have to have them as strings. So basically every ID must have some kind of code. So if it has to have a code, so it means we can use double quote like this. So once we use the double quote, we have to skip and add a single quote and say escape again, single quote. So we want these single quotes to be part of the ID, right? And once that's done, in this case we have to append a semicolon, and in the last case then we just remove the semicolon. So by doing so, if we try, so still getting the same error. Let's see if I've dumped the list. What do I have? Dump the list and say stop here. Okay, so I'm getting a crazy list instead of okay, then it seems I don't need these quotes since I'm using double quotes out as the outer quotes. So everything inside should be considered as a string. Let's go ahead and see what we have. All right, so now I'm having a string of strings. So if I comment this out, is my SQL going to run now? Still can't delete the database. So delete from articles where ID in not working in list. So do I have to specify an array? Let's see. Let me just go ahead and pass in the list and see. Okay, it makes sense. So PDO is expecting a list, an array. So let's continue. I think my issue might be this in statement. I think it's not used like that. It should rather be used like in, and then the value part is passed in, not equals to, which is absolutely wrong what I was trying to do there. So if I say refresh, so I still get the same error. So basically I'm expecting this to be in, so I could avoid adding the list here, the brackets here, to avoid the brackets. So I think this is an issue with my SQL on how to format this kind of request. So if I say in, and then I'll put it in bracket like this, and then mark the question mark, and I'm expecting this list to be injected, which is the list without a bracket inside here, and this statement should be in like this, if I'm not wrong. So this should work now. Okay, still the same problem. Okay, so it seems instead of me to pass in the in and say as a variable like this, I should simply pass in the list as the actual value. So if the variable is accessed here, normally we don't need to specify the value here. By doing so, we should now be able to execute our request and get it running. Article deleted successfully. So that was basically a troublesome case So I was thinking we just have to pass in the parameter like that, but fortunately that's a problem, the SQL problem, and also understanding the PDO statement. So I didn't want to use the parameter binding aspect because it requires you to know the exact number, and therefore we'll have to prepare kind of unknown number of parameters to be bound based on the number of elements we have in the list. So I'll prefer this format of using the in statement. So with that, now we have the capacity of deleting multiple articles. So if we go back, we can see most of them are gone. So once that's done, we can now go ahead and try deleting one article and see if we did not cause any errors or article deleted successfully. So yes, it works without any issue. So if that is done, we can now go back to the admin dashboard content where we have the action of deleting one element here. So we can copy this, then go to the admin content single here. After previewing the article, right under it we have the option of deleting, so we can paste this same link here. So anytime we preview the article, we have the chance of deleting it, and that should be it. I said delete, not edit. So we go to preview, then we do delete. It should ask us if we want to delete. I say no. So let me mouse over and see. So I can see that there's an error, undefined variable article. So yes, the variable here is going to, it should be the article. Yes, so if I mouse over, we should get ID 3. If I delete now, great, article deleted successfully. So if I try to go back, of course this article does not exist, so yes, we cannot preview it, and here we have nothing. So that's great. So I can go ahead now and then try to add more articles. So this brings us to the end of this long episode, and I hope we've been able to learn together and you also enjoyed this debugging experience. So see you in the next episode.